Silver light blazed through the grand hall of Moonstone Palace. Lysandra Whitmore stood at the center of the dais, her skin glowing like a fallen star. Power surged through her veins, ancient and overwhelming, as hundreds of nobles watched in stunned silence. Lady Octavia Ravenscar stumbled backward, her ice-blue eyes wide with terror. "This is dark magic," she screamed. "She is a fraud, a common witch who has bewitched our king." But the silver light only grew brighter, pulsing in rhythm with 3 heartbeats. Lysandra pressed her hand to her belly, feeling the twin sparks of life within her. The children no one believed could exist, the heirs that prophecy had promised. Alpha King Theron Nighthollow rose from his throne, his amber eyes blazing with fierce devotion. He descended the steps toward her, this powerful man who had searched for her across the 7 territories. "Mine," he growled, the word echoing through the hall like thunder. And Lysandra understood then that everything she had ever believed about herself was wrong. She was not cursed. She was not barren. She was not broken. She was something else entirely. She was lunar. 3 days earlier, the revelation had begun. The scent of burning sage hung thick in the autumn air, acrid and suffocating. Lysandra Whitmore stood at the edge of the stone circle, her plain white dress billowing slightly in the cool breeze. 20 pairs of eyes burned into her skin with varying degrees of pity and disdain. She knew what they saw. The barren one, the cursed Omega, the healer who could mend others but could never create life of her own. At 28 years old, Lysandra had stood in this same spot for a decade. 10 years of watching other Omegas receive the sacred blessing while she remained marked by absence. 10 years of whispered conversations that stopped when she entered a room. 10 years of learning to hold her head high when everything inside her wanted to crumble. Today would be no different. Elder Cordelia's voice cut through the gathering like a blade worn smooth by time. "Lysandra Whitmore, step forward." Her heart hammered against her ribs as she moved toward the center of the circle. The elders had arranged themselves around the perimeter, their weathered faces revealing nothing. Behind them, the rest of the pack watched with the casual cruelty of those who had already decided her worth, or lack thereof. Lysandra's fingers found the silver pendant at her throat, her mother's last gift before the fever had claimed her. The crescent moon felt cool against her skin, grounding her in this moment of public humiliation. Her mother's voice echoed in her memory, soft and certain despite the weakness that had stolen her breath. "Remember, my darling, light always returns after darkness. Always." She had clung to those words for 15 years. Some days, they were the only thing that kept her standing. Elder Cordelia raised her hands, and the murmured conversations died instantly. In her weathered grip, she held a small clay bowl of sacred red ochre, the blessing that would be painted on every fertile Omega's forehead. Every Omega except one. "We gather today as we have for generations," the elder announced, her voice carrying across the clearing with practiced authority. "To bestow the blessing of fertility upon our Omegas, that the moon goddess might favor them with children." Lysandra kept her gaze fixed on the ground, counting the pebbles beneath her bare feet. 17, 18, 19. Each small stone a moment to survive before she could retreat to the safety of her cottage. However, Elder Cordelia's voice dropped, and the words slithered down Lysandra's spine like ice water. "The moon goddess only blesses those she deems worthy." A murmur rippled through the crowd. Lysandra felt her cheeks burn, but she forced herself to lift her chin. She would not give them the satisfaction of seeing her cower. Not today. Not ever again. Lysandra Whitmore has been determined barren by our healers since she came of age. The elder's pronouncement rang out like a death sentence. The curse she bears cannot be undone by ritual or prayer. The goddess has spoken. Curse. The word they always used, as though her body's betrayal was punishment for some ancient sin, as though she had chosen this fate, as though she had asked to be born different, broken, less than. Elder Cordelia stepped away, leaving Lysandra standing alone in the center of the circle. You may return to your place. Not unkind, that voice, but final, absolute. A door closing on any hope she might have harbored. Lysandra turned to go, her movements careful and measured. She would not stumble. She would not cry. She would walk out of this circle with the same quiet dignity she had cultivated through years of rejection. Then she felt it, a prickling at the base of her skull, a weight of attention that pressed against her skin like a physical touch. Someone was watching her with an intensity that went far beyond curiosity. Her gaze swept the tree line, searching for the source of that burning awareness, and found him. He stood partially concealed by the shadow of an ancient oak, his presence as unexpected as a wolf among sheep. Even from this distance, Lysandra recognized the broad shoulders and imposing silhouette that had haunted whispered conversations throughout the Seven Territories. Theron Nighthollow, Alpha King of all Alphas, the beast they all feared. What was he doing here? The Alpha King never attended pack rituals, especially not those of a minor pack in the Outer Territories. His presence was as out of place as a hurricane in a summer garden. His eyes found hers across the clearing, amber, golden and burning like twin flames in the afternoon light. They locked onto her with an intensity that made the hair on her arms rise. Something passed between them in that moment, a current of awareness that Lysandra could not name or explain. Recognition, her wolf whispered, though she had never seen him before in her life. Then he turned away, melting into the forest shadows as silently as he had appeared. Lysandra released a breath she had not realized she was holding. Her heart raced for reasons that had nothing to do with the ritual's humiliation. For just a moment, those amber eyes had seen her, really seen her, not the barren Omega, not the cursed one, just her. The remainder of the ceremony passed in a blur. She watched other Omegas receive their blessings, their foreheads marked with sacred red, while she stood empty and unmarked at the edge of the crowd. When the ritual finally concluded, dusk had begun to fall, casting long shadows across the forest floor. The pack dispersed toward the great hall for the celebratory feast, where blessed Omegas would be presented to potential mates. Lysandra would not attend. She never did. Lysandra. The familiar voice of her only friend cut through her scattered thoughts. Bryn approached with her characteristic warmth, her dark curls bouncing with each step. The fresh red mark of the blessing stood vivid against her brown skin, a reminder of everything Lysandra would never have. Do not say you are sorry. Lysandra's voice came out sharper than intended. I cannot bear to hear it again. Bryn nodded, understanding softening her features. I was not going to. I was going to suggest we skip the feast and go to the hot springs instead. Perfect night for stargazing. Despite everything, Lysandra managed a small smile. That sounds wonderful. They walked in comfortable silence through the darkening forest, following a narrow path that wound away from the pack grounds. Night descended fully as they traveled, the full moon rising bright and silver above the treetops. Its light filtered through the canopy, painting dappled patterns on the forest floor. Did you see him? Bryn asked suddenly, her voice hushed with awe. The Alpha King. He was watching the ceremony. I saw. Lysandra tried to sound casual, though her pulse quickened at the memory of those amber eyes. I cannot imagine why he would be interested in our small pack's fertility ritual. Rumor has it he is looking for a mate. Bryn's eyebrows rose suggestively. After his queen died last winter, the council has been pressuring him to remarry. They say the curse must be broken, or he will never have an heir. Lysandra's brow furrowed. Curse? You have not heard? They say anyone the Alpha King claims as his mate dies within 3 days. Something about a witch's revenge. Bryn shivered dramatically. His last queen, Lady Evangeline, lasted only 72 hours after the marking ceremony. That sounds like superstitious nonsense. Perhaps, but 3 queens have died, Lysandra. 3. And each one within 3 days of being claimed. Bryn's voice dropped lower. Some say only a special Omega can break the curse, one with moon magic in her blood. Lysandra shook her head, dismissing the fairy tale. Well, he certainly will not find what he is looking for with me. A cursed king would hardly want a barren Omega. The words tasted bitter on her tongue, but she spoke them anyway. Better to acknowledge reality than to harbor foolish hopes. They reached the hot springs as the moon climbed higher, steam rising from the surface and creating an ethereal mist that swirled in the cool night air. The springs were deserted, everyone else attending the feast. Lysandra slipped out of her white dress and eased into the warm water, feeling the tension begin to leave her body as the heat enveloped her. Bryn joined her a moment later, sighing contentedly. Sometimes I think I could stay here forever, Bryn mused, tilting her head back to look at the stars. Lysandra closed her eyes, letting the mineral-rich water work its magic on her tired muscles. If only we could. They soaked in peaceful silence, the only sounds the gentle lapping of water and the distant hooting of an owl. Then Lysandra became aware of a prickling sensation at the base of her spine. The same feeling from the ritual, the same weight of attention pressing against her skin. She opened her eyes and scanned the surrounding trees, seeing nothing but shadows and moonlight. Yet the sensation persisted, raising goosebumps along her arms, despite the warmth of the water. "Do you feel that?" she whispered. Bryn frowned, sitting up straighter. "Feel what?" A twig snapped somewhere in the darkness beyond the springs. Both women froze, their heightened senses straining to detect any movement. The forest had gone eerily silent. No owl calls, no rustling leaves. Even the insects had stopped their nighttime chorus. "Probably just a deer," Bryn said, but her voice lacked conviction. Lysandra was not convinced either. The silence felt intentional, predatory. She eased toward the edge of the pool, ready to flee if necessary. Then he stepped into the clearing, and her heart nearly stopped. The Alpha King stood at the edge of the springs, his powerful frame silhouetted against the moonlight. He wore only loose black pants, his chest bare and sculpted like marble. Dark hair fell in waves to his shoulders, and those amber eyes gleamed like a predator's in the darkness. He was beautiful, terrifying, and utterly, overwhelmingly male. "Your Majesty," Bryn gasped, immediately lowering her gaze in deference as she sank deeper into the water to cover herself. Lysandra knew she should do the same. Show proper respect, avert her eyes, make herself small and submissive as Omegas were expected to do in the presence of an Alpha, especially one of his stature. Instead, she found herself staring directly at him, transfixed by the intensity of his presence. He moved closer, his gaze never leaving her face. "Leave us," he commanded. "Bryn." Bryn shot Lysandra a panicked look, torn between obedience to her king and loyalty to her friend. "It is all right," Lysandra assured her, though her mouth had gone dry with something that was not quite fear. "I will be fine." After a moment's hesitation, Bryn climbed out of the water, hastily wrapped herself in her cloak, and disappeared down the path toward the pack grounds. She threw one last worried glance over her shoulder before the trees swallowed her. Once they were alone, the Alpha King approached the edge of the springs, his movements fluid and predatory. Lysandra remained where she was, the warm water lapping at her collarbone, providing minimal coverage. She should feel vulnerable, exposed. Instead, she felt alive in a way she had not experienced in years. "You are the Barren Omega," he said. Not a question. A statement of fact delivered in a voice like thunder rolling across distant mountains. She flinched at the blunt description, but forced herself to meet his gaze. "I have a name, Your Majesty. It is Lysandra." Something flickered across his face. Surprise, perhaps. Or amusement. Alphas were not accustomed to being challenged, especially not by Omegas. "Lysandra." He repeated her name slowly, as though testing the feel of it on his tongue. "Do you know who I am?" "Everyone knows who you are. You are Theron Nighthollow, Alpha King of the Seven Territories. The beast they all fear." A smile curved his lips, slow and dangerous. It sent a shiver down her spine that had nothing to do with cold. "And yet you speak to me as though we are equals." "Forgive me if I have offended you." She paused, "but I have never been skilled at pretending to be less than I am." Instead of anger, his smile widened. "No, I do not imagine you are." He crouched at the edge of the water, bringing his face level with hers. This close, she could see the flecks of gold in his amber eyes. She could smell his scent, earth and pine, and something wild that made her Omega instincts stir despite herself. "That is what interests me about you, Lysandra Whitmore. You were rejected today, humiliated before your entire pack, yet you hold your head high. You do not cower. You do not plead for acceptance." She swallowed hard, uncertain how to respond. "What choice do I have? To break down every time I am reminded of what I lack would be to live in constant despair." His gaze intensified, searching her face as though looking for something specific. "And what is it you believe you lack, little Omega?" The question caught her off guard. "I cannot bear children. I am cursed." "Cursed?" he repeated thoughtfully. "And who told you this? Your elders? Your healers?" His hand reached out suddenly, fingers brushing against the silver pendant at her throat. The brief contact sent electricity coursing through her veins. Or perhaps someone knew better than any healer what truly lies within you. His touch lingered for a moment too long, and Lysandra found herself unable to speak. Her mind clouded with his proximity, the intensity of his attention, the heat of his skin so close to hers. When he finally withdrew his hand, she felt the loss like a physical ache. "You should return to your pack," Theron said abruptly, rising to his full height. "These woods are not safe after dark, especially for an Omega alone. I have walked these forests since childhood." She gathered her courage, surprised by her own boldness. "I am hardly defenseless." A low, rumbling chuckle escaped him. "No, I do not imagine you are." He turned to leave, then paused, glancing back over his shoulder. From his pocket, he withdrew something small. A seed, black as midnight with a faint silvery sheen that rippled across its surface in the moonlight. "Plant this tonight," he said, his voice dropping to a near whisper. "Under the waning moon, water it with 3 drops of your blood, then wait." Lysandra stared at the seed he placed on a flat rock near the water's edge. What will grow? The truth. His amber eyes held hers with an intensity that stole her breath. Plant it, Lysandra, if you wish to understand what you truly are. Before she could question him further, he melted into the shadows, leaving her alone with the sound of her thundering heart and 1,000 unanswered questions. Lysandra remained in the springs until her fingers wrinkled and the water began to cool. Her mind raced, trying to make sense of the encounter. Why would the Alpha King seek her out? Why would he care about a Barren Omega from a minor pack? His words echoed in her memory, haunting her with their implications. Or perhaps someone knew better than any healer what truly lies within you. What did he know that she did not? She finally emerged from the water, dried herself with her dress, and retrieved the strange seed from the rock. It felt warm in her palm, almost alive. The silvery sheen pulsed faintly, like a heartbeat. By the time she returned to the pack grounds, the feast was still in full swing. Laughter and music spilled from the great hall, a celebration she had no part in. She slipped past quietly, heading for the small cottage at the edge of the settlement that served as both her home and her healing room. Inside, the familiar scent of dried herbs and tinctures welcomed her. She lit a single candle and sank onto her narrow bed, exhaustion washing over her. But sleep remained elusive. Her mind kept returning to amber eyes and cryptic words. The seed seemed to burn against her palm, demanding attention. Plant it under the waning moon. Water it with 3 drops of your blood. It sounded like something from the old tales. Magic and mystery and things that sensible people did not believe in. The sensible thing would be to throw it into the fire and forget this strange night ever happened. But curiosity burned within her, stronger than caution. As the moon reached its zenith, Lysandra made her decision. She took a small clay pot, filled it with rich soil from her herb garden, and carefully placed the seed in the center. Then she pricked her finger with a thorn and allowed 3 drops of blood to fall onto the dark earth. "Grow," she whispered, feeling foolish talking to a seed. "Show me what I need to know." She placed the pot on her windowsill, where the moon's light fell directly upon it, and finally lay down to sleep. She dreamed that night of a vast forest, unlike any she had seen before. The trees towered impossibly high, their trunks wider than houses, their silver leaves creating a cathedral-like canopy above. She walked barefoot through dappled moonlight, following a path that seemed to form beneath her feet with each step. In the center of the forest stood a massive tree, its bark gleaming silver white. As she approached, she noticed a small door set into its trunk, just tall enough for her to enter. A voice whispered from within, familiar yet strange, like a half-remembered lullaby. "Come inside, daughter of the moon. It is time you remembered who you are." She reached for the door and woke with a gasp, her heart pounding. Sunlight streamed through her window, falling warm across her bed. She sat up, disoriented, the dream still vivid in her mind. Daughter of the moon. What did that mean? Then she remembered the seed. She scrambled out of bed and rushed to the windowsill. The pot sat exactly where she had left it, the soil undisturbed. But from its center rose a tiny silver shoot, no taller than her little finger, with 2 perfect leaves unfurling toward the morning light. Impossible. No seed could germinate and sprout overnight. She had studied healing and herbology for a decade. She knew the natural order of things. This was not natural. Her hand trembled as she reached toward one of the delicate leaves. The moment her finger touched the silver surface, a jolt of energy surged through her, so powerful it nearly knocked her backward. Images flashed through her mind. A silver forest bathed in moonlight, wolves running beneath a full moon, and a woman with her face, adorned with a crown of starlight, standing before thousands. A knock at her door shattered the vision. She withdrew her hand from the plant, shaken and confused. When she opened the door, Bryn stood outside, her expression troubled. "Lysandra, the council has summoned you." "The council?" She frowned. The pack council rarely interacted with her directly. Why? They would not say. Bryn bit her lip nervously. But Elder Cordelia collapsed last night with a terrible fever. She has been asking for you specifically. Lysandra grabbed her healing bag without hesitation. Elder Cordelia had never been kind to her, but she was still a patient, still someone who needed help. "There is something else," Bryn added in a lower voice, her eyes wide with something between fear and excitement. "The Alpha King's guards have arrived in the village. They are asking questions about you." Lysandra's blood ran cold. "About me? I do not know what it means. But Lysandra..." Bryn grasped her arm. "What happened last night at the springs? What did he want?" She thought of amber eyes and cryptic words, and a seed that had sprouted overnight into something impossible. "I do not know," she admitted, "but I intend to find out." Elder Cordelia's cottage was crowded when Lysandra arrived. Pack healers stood around the bed, their faces grim. The elder lay motionless, her normally ruddy complexion ashen, her breathing shallow and labored. "She woke once," one of the healers reported. "She was delirious, kept saying your name." Lysandra knelt beside the bed, placing her hand on the elder's forehead, burning with fever. Whatever this was, it had struck hard and fast. She set to work, measuring out herbs and mixing remedies. The hours passed in a blur of cold compresses and fever teas. By midday, the crisis had broken. Elder Cordelia's breathing steadied, her temperature dropping to something resembling normal. The other healers left one by one, leaving Lysandra alone with her patient. She was about to stand when the elder's eyes fluttered open. "Lysandra." The voice was weak, barely audible. "You should rest. The fever has broken, but you need time to recover." "No time." The old woman's hand shot out with surprising strength, grasping Lysandra's wrist. Her eyes, suddenly clear and piercing, fixed on Lysandra's face. "He knows. The Alpha King. He knows what you are." Lysandra's heart stuttered. "What are you talking about?" "Not just a healer." Elder Cordelia's grip tightened. "You were never just that. Your mother hid you well, but time has run out. The prophecy is awakening." "What prophecy?" "Elder Cordelia, please. I do not understand." But exhaustion claimed the old woman once more, her eyes rolling back as she slipped into unconscious sleep. Lysandra sat back, her mind reeling. First the Alpha King's cryptic words. Now this. Before she could process any of it, the cottage door burst open. Commander Aldrich stood in the doorway, his silver wolf insignia marking him as the head of the Alpha King's royal guard. Lysandra Whitmore. His voice carried the weight of absolute authority. "By order of Alpha King Theron Nighthollow, you are commanded to accompany us to the royal palace, immediately." Lysandra rose slowly, her heart pounding. "On what grounds?" "His Majesty's interest in you is of a personal nature." The commander's expression remained impassive. "You will learn more when you arrive." "And if I refuse?" Something flickered in his eyes, a warning. "That would be most unwise." She looked around the small cottage, her mind racing through impossible options. She could run. She could hide. She could refuse and face whatever consequences came. or she could go to the palace and finally get answers. The silver plant sat in her window at home, growing faster than any natural thing should grow. The Alpha King had given her a test. Perhaps it was time to discover what she had passed. 1 hour, she said. I need to gather my things. Commander Aldrich nodded. A carriage awaits. Be ready. 1 hour later, Lysandra stood beside an elegant black carriage bearing the royal crest. Bryn held her in a fierce embrace. Send word when you can, Bryn whispered. I will. Lysandra was not certain that was true, but she said it anyway. As she climbed into the carriage, the silver seedling safely wrapped and held against her chest, she caught sight of Elder Cordelia watching from her cottage window. Even from this distance, Lysandra could read the old woman's lips. Remember who you are. The carriage began to move, carrying her away from everything she had known toward a destiny she could not yet imagine. In her arms, the impossible plant pulsed with faint silver light, and somewhere in the distance, she could swear she heard a wolf howl. The carriage rocked gently as it traveled the winding road toward the capital. Lysandra sat across from Commander Aldrich, the silver seedling cradled carefully in her lap. Outside the window, familiar forests gave way to rolling hills she had never seen before. She had never ventured beyond her pack's territory. The world beyond those boundaries had always seemed like something from stories, distant and unreachable. Now it unfolded before her in shades of green and gold, beautiful and terrifying in equal measure. Commander Aldrich watched her with eyes that revealed nothing. His weathered face bore a long scar from temple to jaw, evidence of battles survived. He had served the Alpha King for decades, Lysandra had heard. He had seen things that would break ordinary men. You must have questions, he said finally, breaking the silence that had stretched between them for miles. Lysandra looked up from the passing landscape. Dozens, but I doubt you will answer them. A faint smile touched his lips. Try me. She considered for a moment, then chose her most pressing concern. Why does the Alpha King want me at the palace? What does he want from me? The commander's expression remained carefully neutral. His Majesty's reasons are his own, but I can tell you this. You are not the first Omega he has shown interest in. However, you are the first he has commanded be brought to him with such urgency. The statement did nothing to ease her anxiety. That is not comforting. It was not meant to be, merely informative. Lysandra glanced down at the silver plant in her lap. Its leaves had grown noticeably since they departed, now as broad as her palm. The metallic sheen caught the afternoon sunlight, casting strange patterns across her white dress. Has he told you what I am? She asked quietly. What he believes I am? Something flickered in the commander's eyes. Surprise, perhaps. Or wariness. What makes you ask that? He told me I am not what my pack believes me to be, that I am not cursed. She stroked one of the silver leaves, feeling that familiar jolt of energy, weaker now, but still present. He gave me this seed, said it would show me the truth. Commander Aldrich was silent for so long that Lysandra thought he would not answer. When he finally spoke, his voice had lost some of its formal edge. I have served King Theron for 30 years. I have watched him face enemies that would make most alphas cower. I have seen him rule with iron will and unwavering strength. He paused, his gaze distant. I have never seen him intrigued the way he is by you. That is not an answer. No, he agreed. It is a warning. Whatever game fate is playing, whatever the king sees in you, be careful. He is not a man to be trifled with, but he is also not a man who acts without reason. The rest of their journey passed in relative silence. Lysandra watched the landscape change, forests yielding to vast plains that eventually gave way to the sprawling outskirts of the capital city. Lunaries. She pressed her face to the window, awestruck despite her circumstances. The capital was beyond anything she could have imagined. Stone buildings rose several stories high, their windows gleaming in the late afternoon sun. People of all designations moved through the streets with purpose, dressed in clothing far finer than anything she had seen in her village. And at the center of it all, perched atop the highest hill, stood the royal palace, Moonstone Palace. It was a massive structure of pale stone and glittering glass, its spires reaching toward the sky like fingers grasping for the moon. Even from this distance, Lysandra could feel the power emanating from those ancient walls. Centuries of alpha kings had ruled from that seat. Centuries of history pressed down upon the present. "It is beautiful," she whispered, unable to contain her wonder. "And dangerous," Commander Aldrich added softly. "Beauty often is." Their carriage passed through iron gates twice her height, guarded by soldiers in black uniforms bearing the silver wolf insignia. The palace grounds spread before them in immaculate splendor. Gardens bloomed with flowers Lysandra could not name. Fountains sparkled in the fading daylight. Courtyards of white marble reflected the golden sky. Everything was designed to impress and intimidate. It was working. They came to a stop before a side entrance, less grand than the main gates, but still more elaborate than any building in her village. Commander Aldrich stepped out first, then extended a hand to help her descend. "Welcome to Moonstone Palace," he said, his voice formal once more. "Your new home." The words sent ice through her veins. "My new home? This is not a visit, then." Before he could answer, a woman appeared in the doorway. Tall and elegant, with steel-gray hair pulled into a severe bun, she assessed Lysandra with eyes that missed nothing. Her posture spoke of absolute authority, her expression of someone who had seen everything and was impressed by nothing. "Commander," she acknowledged with a slight nod. "This is the Omega." "Yes, Lady Isadora. This is Lysandra Whitmore." Lady Isadora's gaze swept over Lysandra's simple dress, her windswept hair, the clay pot she clutched like a lifeline. Something shifted in those cold eyes. Recognition, perhaps, or calculation. "His Majesty expected you sooner." "The Council required persuasion," Commander Aldrich explained. "I see." Lady Isadora's attention returned to Lysandra, studying her with unsettling intensity. "Well, come along then. We must make you presentable before your audience with the king." "Audience?" Lysandra's anxiety spiked. "When?" "Tonight, at the full moon ceremony." Lady Isadora was already turning to lead the way inside. 3 days from now, the moon will be at its peak. His Majesty has specific plans for that evening. 3 days. The words echoed in Lysandra's mind as she followed the stern woman into the palace. Whatever was happening, whatever the Alpha King wanted from her, she had 3 days to understand it. 3 days to discover the truth about what she truly was. The interior of Moonstone Palace exceeded even the grandeur of its exterior. Marble floors gleamed beneath their feet, and tapestries depicting ancient wolf legends adorned the walls. Servants bowed respectfully as they passed, their curious gazes following Lysandra when they thought she would not notice. Lady Isadora led her through a labyrinth of corridors, each more opulent than the last. Finally, they stopped before an ornately carved wooden door. "Your chambers," Lady Isadora announced, pushing the door open. Lysandra stepped inside and lost her breath. The suite was easily 4 times the size of her entire cottage. Sunlight streamed through tall windows, illuminating a sitting area with plush chairs and a writing desk. Through an archway, she glimpsed a bedroom with the largest bed she had ever seen, draped in silvery blue silks that shimmered in the light. "This cannot be for me." The words escaped before she could stop them. There must be some mistake. His Majesty personally selected these rooms for you. Lady Isadora's voice held a hint of something. Curiosity, perhaps, or suspicion. They adjoin the royal gardens. He thought you might appreciate the proximity to plant life. Her gaze dropped to the silver seedling in Lysandra's arms. A flicker of something crossed her features before she composed herself once more. "A bath has been prepared. Afterward, you will be dressed appropriately for dinner. The king expects all his guests to observe proper protocol." "I am not a guest." Lysandra's voice came out steadier than she felt. "I am a prisoner." For the first time, Lady Isadora's stern countenance softened slightly. "No, child. A prisoner would not be given chambers in the royal wing, nor would they be presented at the full moon ceremony as an honored attendee." She paused. "Whatever you may believe about your circumstances, His Majesty has plans for you that extend far beyond imprisonment." Before Lysandra could respond, 3 young Omega women entered carrying towels, scented oils, and a garment bag. "These attendants will help you prepare," Lady Isadora explained. "I will return when it is time for dinner." With that, she swept from the room, leaving Lysandra alone with the 3 Omegas who regarded her with poorly concealed curiosity. "I am Wren," said the tallest of the 3, a slender woman with warm brown eyes and honey-colored hair. "This is Tansy and Fern. We are here to help you settle in." Lysandra placed her seedling carefully on a table near the window where it could catch the remaining daylight. The plant had grown again during the journey, its stem now nearly as thick as her thumb. "That is beautiful," Fern observed, her voice soft. She was small and quiet, with auburn hair that fell past her shoulders. "I have never seen a plant quite like it." "It is called a moonflower," Lysandra said, though she was not entirely certain that was true. It was simply the name that felt right. Tansy moved closer, her eyes bright with interest. She was pretty in a sharp-featured way, with black hair and a smile that did not quite reach her eyes. "Where did you get it?" Something about the question made Lysandra hesitate. "It was a gift." "From the king?" "From someone," Lysandra said carefully, offering nothing more. The bath they led her to was more like a small pool set into the floor of an adjoining chamber. Steam rose from the water, carrying the scent of jasmine and moonflower. Despite her anxiety, Lysandra could not help but relax as she sank into its warmth. The attendants worked efficiently, washing her hair with oils that left it soft and shining. They spoke among themselves occasionally, asking questions about her village and her life there. Lysandra answered cautiously, still uncertain of her position in this strange new world. "Is it true, what they are saying?" Tansy asked eventually, her voice dropping to a whisper. "That you are the Omega from the prophecy?" Lysandra froze. Elder Cordelia's feverish words echoed in her mind. "The prophecy is awakening." "What prophecy?" she asked, keeping her voice neutral. The 3 women exchanged glances. Wren and Fern looked uncomfortable, but Tansy leaned closer, her eyes gleaming with something that might have been eagerness. "The prophecy of the silver wolf. They say a Barren Omega will be revealed as something more, that she will bear twins to the Alpha King and unite the 7 territories in lasting peace." Twins? The word struck Lysandra like a physical blow. Bear children? She could not bear children. Everyone knew that. "I know nothing of any prophecy," she said firmly. And I am certainly not capable of bearing anyone's children. I am barren. The healers confirmed it years ago. Tansy opened her mouth to say more, but the door to the bathing chamber opened. Lady Isadora appeared, her expression sharp. That is quite enough gossip, she said coolly. Finish preparing her. Dinner is in 1 hour. The attendants fell silent immediately, focusing on their tasks with renewed diligence. But Lysandra caught Tansy glancing at her several times, that strange light still flickering in her dark eyes. Something about the woman unsettled her. Something she could not quite name. They helped her from the bath and dried her with soft towels, then led her back to the bedroom where the garment bag waited. The gown inside stole her breath. It was a flowing creation of silver blue silk that seemed to capture and reflect light like moonlit water. Tiny crystals adorned the bodice, mimicking the night sky. The fabric was soft as a whisper against her skin, the craftsmanship finer than anything she had ever touched. I cannot wear this, she protested weakly. It is too fine. I am just a healer from a small pack. You can, and you will, Lady Isadora replied, appearing in the doorway. The king selected it personally. With the attendant's help, Lysandra slipped into the gown. It fit perfectly, as though it had been made specifically for her body. They arranged her pale hair in an elegant twist, adorned with small silver pins shaped like crescent moons. A touch of cosmetics enhanced her features, bringing color to her cheeks and depth to her gray eyes. When they finally allowed her to look in the mirror, she barely recognized herself. The woman who stared back looked regal, ethereal, nothing like the simple village healer she had always been. Now you look like what you truly are, Lady Isadora murmured, almost to herself. Lysandra turned to face her. And what is that exactly? The older woman met her gaze steadily. That is for the king to reveal, not me. A knock at the door interrupted them. Commander Aldrich had returned, now dressed in formal attire with a ceremonial sword at his hip. It is time, he announced. His Majesty awaits. Lysandra's heart pounded as Commander Aldrich led her through the palace corridors. The silver gown whispered against the marble floor with each step, and the crystals caught the candlelight, casting tiny rainbows across the walls. They stopped before a set of double doors carved with intricate wolf motifs. Guards flanked either side, their postures rigid with respect. The private dining room, Commander Aldrich explained. His Majesty prefers intimate settings for important conversations. Important conversations. The words did nothing to calm her nerves. The doors swung open, and Lysandra stepped inside. The room was smaller than she expected, designed for comfort rather than grandeur. A fireplace crackled warmly in one corner. Candles flickered on every surface, their light dancing across rich tapestries and polished wood. A table set for two occupied the center of the space, laden with dishes that made her stomach growl despite her anxiety. And at the far end of the room, standing before a window that overlooked the moonlit gardens, was Theron Nighthollow. He turned as she entered, and those amber eyes swept over her with an intensity that made her breath catch. He wore black tonight, his formal attire accentuating the breadth of his shoulders and the power coiled in every line of his body. The firelight caught the sharp planes of his face, highlighting the strong jaw and full lips that curved into a slight smile as he observed her. Lysandra. Her name sounded different on his tongue, weighted with meaning. You are even more beautiful than I remembered. She curtsied, the motion feeling strange in such a fine gown. Your Majesty, I confess I am uncertain why I am here. Are you? He moved toward her, each step deliberate. The air between them seemed to thicken. I think you have some idea. I think you have felt it since the moment our eyes met in that clearing. Her heart raced. She wanted to deny it, but the words would not come. Because he was right. She had felt something. A recognition. A pull toward him that defied logic and reason. Please. He gestured toward the table. Sit. Eat. We have much to discuss, and the next 3 days will be demanding. She took the offered seat, acutely aware of him moving to sit across from her. Servants appeared silently, pouring wine and adjusting dishes before disappearing just as quietly. For several minutes, they ate in silence. The food was extraordinary. Roasted meats and fresh vegetables, warm bread and delicate sauces. Lysandra had never tasted anything so fine. You are not what I expected, Theron said finally, studying her over the rim of his wineglass. What did you expect? Someone broken. Someone who had let years of rejection crush her spirit. His amber eyes gleamed. Instead, I find a woman who challenged me at our first meeting, who looked directly at the Alpha King and demanded to be called by her name. Heat crept up her cheeks. I apologize if I was disrespectful. Do not apologize. It is precisely that fire that drew me to you. He set down his glass, his expression growing serious. Tell me, Lysandra, the seed I gave you, did you plant it? She nodded slowly. It sprouted overnight. A silver plant that should not exist according to any natural law I know. And when you touched its leaves, what did you see? Her breath caught. How did he know about the visions? I saw a forest, silver trees, and women with faces like mine wearing crowns of starlight. Something shifted in his expression. Relief, perhaps, or satisfaction. Then, it is as I suspected. You are exactly what I have been searching for. What is that? Her voice trembled slightly. What am I? Theron leaned forward, his presence overwhelming even across the table. You are a lunar omega, Lysandra, the last of an ancient bloodline that was thought extinct. Your ancestors were the most powerful omegas in existence. They wielded moon magic. They healed wounds that no ordinary healer could touch. They saw truths that others could not perceive. The words washed over her, impossible, yet resonating with something deep in her soul. That cannot be true. I am barren, cursed. The healers confirmed it. The healers were wrong. His voice hardened. Or perhaps they lied. Someone wanted to hide what you are, Lysandra. Someone went to great lengths to suppress your true nature, even from yourself. My mother, she whispered, understanding dawning. The pendant. The words about light returning. Had her mother known all along? I believe so. Theron's expression softened slightly. Lunar omegas were hunted to near extinction centuries ago. Their power was feared by those who did not understand it. The survivors went into hiding, suppressing their abilities and concealing their true nature even from their own children. Lysandra's hand moved to her throat, touching the place where her mother's pendant usually rested. She had left it behind, she realized, on the pillow. A goodbye she had not fully understood at the time. Why are you telling me this? She asked. What do you want from me? The question hung between them, heavy with implication. Theron rose from his chair and moved around the table to stand before her. He extended his hand, waiting for her to take it. Come with me, he said. There is something you need to see. He led her through a hidden door at the back of the dining room, out into the royal gardens. Moonlight bathed the paths in silver, turning ordinary flowers into something ethereal. The night air was cool against her skin, carrying the scent of blooming jasmine and something else, something familiar. They walked in silence until they reached a secluded courtyard surrounded by high hedges. In its center stood a single tree, unlike anything Lysandra had ever seen. Its bark was silver white, gleaming in the moonlight. Its leaves shimmered with a metallic sheen that reminded her of the seedling in her room. And at its base, a carpet of moonflowers bloomed, their petals open to the night sky. "This is the last moonflower tree in existence," Theron said quietly. "It was planted by my great-grandmother, who was bonded to a lunar omega. The tree should have died when the last of your kind vanished. Instead, it has remained, waiting." Lysandra stepped closer, drawn by something she could not name. The tree seemed to pulse with life, with power, with welcome. "Waiting for what?" she whispered. "For you." Theron moved to stand beside her, close enough that she could feel the heat of his body. "For the one who would awaken it." Without thinking, she reached out and pressed her palm against the silver bark. Energy surged through her, the same sensation she had felt when touching her seedling, but amplified 1,000-fold. Visions flooded her mind. Her mother, young and radiant, standing in this very spot. Her grandmother, before that. An unbroken line of women stretching back centuries, all bearing the mark of the moon. And beneath the visions, a voice, ancient and powerful and achingly familiar. "Daughter, you have finally come home." Lysandra gasped, stumbling backward. Theron caught her, his strong arms wrapping around her waist to steady her. "What did you see?" he demanded, his voice rough with urgency. "My mother, my grandmother, all of them." Tears streamed down her cheeks, though she did not remember starting to cry. They were all lunar omegas. They all stood here. They all heard the same voice. Theron turned her in his arms, cupping her face in his large hands. His amber eyes searched hers with an intensity that stole her breath. "You are not cursed, Lysandra. You are not barren. You are the most precious thing in the 7 territories." His thumb brushed away her tears with a gentleness that made her heart ache. "And I have spent the last 2 years searching for you." They returned to a small sitting room adjacent to the garden where a fire crackled warmly and comfortable chairs invited conversation. Theron poured wine for them both, his movements deliberate, as though he was gathering his thoughts. Lysandra watched him, this powerful alpha who had turned her world upside down in the span of 2 days. Questions burned in her mind, but she waited, sensing that he would answer them in his own time. Finally, he sat across from her, the firelight casting dancing shadows across his face. "I told you that lunar omegas were rare," he began. "What I did not tell you is why I have been searching for one so desperately." "The curse," Lysandra said quietly, remembering Bryn's whispered gossip at the hot springs. "They say anyone you claim as your mate dies within 3 days. Pain flickered across his features, quickly suppressed. "Yes, the curse is real, and it has destroyed everyone I have ever tried to love." He stared into the fire, and Lysandra saw the weight of centuries pressing down upon his shoulders. 15 years ago, a witch named Moira came to my court. Her brother had been caught stealing from the royal treasury and was sentenced to death according to our laws. She begged me for mercy. I refused. His jaw tightened. So she cursed me. She said that since I had no mercy for her family, I would never be allowed to have one of my own. Anyone I claimed as my mate would die within 3 days of the marking. "Evangeline," Lysandra whispered, remembering the name he had spoken in the garden. "My first queen." His voice broke slightly. "I did not believe the curse was real. I thought it was the ravings of a grieving woman. So I claimed Evangeline despite the warning." He closed his eyes. She was dead within 72 hours. A sudden illness that no healer could explain or cure. The anguish in his words was palpable. Lysandra's heart ached for him, this man who had carried such guilt for so long. There have been 2 others since, he continued, opening his eyes to meet her gaze. Each time, I hoped the curse had weakened. Each time, I was wrong. After the 3rd death, I swore I would never claim another mate. I would rule alone. I would let my line die with me, rather than cause any more innocent deaths. But then you found the prophecy, Lysandra guessed. He nodded. 3 months ago, an ancient text was discovered in the palace archives. A prophecy written before the lunar omegas disappeared. He reached into his coat and withdrew a small scroll, yellowed with age. It speaks of a cursed king who will find salvation in the one he least expects. An Omega believed Barren, who carries moon magic in her blood. She alone will be immune to his curse. She alone will bear his children and break the darkness that binds him. He handed her the scroll. Lysandra unrolled it carefully, her eyes scanning the faded text. When the silver moon ascends its throne, the cursed king shall find his own. An Omega scorned, thought empty within, shall prove the ancients were not wrong. Her blood carries the lunar flame, her womb the gift none thought to claim. Through her, the curse shall be undone. Through twins of moon, 2 realms made one. But heed this warning, Wolf King bold. Before thy 33rd moon grows cold, the bond must form, the magic wake, or all shall shatter, all shall break. Lysandra looked up from the scroll, her hands trembling. Before your 33rd moon grows cold. What does that mean? My 33rd birthday falls on the night of the full moon ceremony. Theron's voice was heavy with the weight of his words. 3 days from now, if the curse is not broken by then, it will become permanent. I will never be able to take a mate, and the Night Hollow line will end with me. 3 days. The ticking clock that had haunted the edges of her awareness suddenly became deafening. You believe I am this Omega, she said slowly, the one from the prophecy. The moonflower confirms it. Only a lunar Omega can make it grow. He leaned forward, his amber eyes burning with desperate hope. You are my last chance, Lysandra, not just to break the curse, but to have a future, a family, everything I had given up hope of ever having. The enormity of what he was asking pressed down upon her. He was not just asking her to be his queen. He was asking her to bet her life on a prophecy she had only just learned existed. What if the prophecy is wrong? She whispered. What if I am not truly a lunar Omega? What if I claim the bond and die like the others? Theron rose from his chair and knelt before her, taking her hands in his. His touch sent electricity coursing through her veins, the same sensation she had felt at the hot springs. The same pull that defied logic and reason. I will not force you to do anything, he said, his voice rough with emotion. I have had enough of death and grief to last 1,000 lifetimes. If you choose to refuse, I will send you home with my protection and gratitude for simply being willing to listen. But you hope I will stay? I hope. He laughed softly, the sound bitter and raw. I have not allowed myself to hope in a very long time, but when I saw you at that ritual, standing tall despite your humiliation, meeting my eyes when everyone else looked away, I felt something I thought I had lost forever. His grip on her hands tightened. I felt like maybe the darkness was not all there was. They sat together in comfortable silence for a long moment, the fire crackling softly between them. Lysandra's mind raced with everything she had learned. Lunar Omega, prophecy, curse. It was all too much to process, yet somehow it felt right, like pieces of a puzzle finally clicking into place. A knock at the door shattered the moment. Commander Aldrich entered, his expression grim. "Your Majesty, there is a situation that requires your immediate attention." Theron rose, his posture shifting instantly from vulnerable man to commanding king. "What is it?" "Lady Octavia Ravenscar has arrived at the palace. She is demanding an audience." The name sent ice through Lysandra's veins, though she was not entirely sure why. She watched Theron's jaw tighten, saw the flash of anger in his amber eyes. "I did not summon her." "No, Your Majesty. She claims to have heard rumors about a new Omega in the palace." Aldrich's gaze flickered briefly to Lysandra. "She is concerned about the implications for her position." "Her position?" Theron repeated flatly. "A position that exists only in her own mind and her father's ambitions." Lysandra understood then. Lady Octavia was the woman the council had selected to be Theron's bride, the woman who expected to become queen, regardless of curses or prophecies or the wishes of the king himself. "Should I send her away?" Aldrich asked. Theron was silent for a long moment, clearly weighing his options. Finally, he shook his head. "No. Denying her an audience will only fuel more rumors. Show her to the formal receiving room. I will deal with her there." Aldrich bowed and withdrew. Theron turned to Lysandra, his expression softening. "I apologize for this interruption. Lady Octavia is a complication I had hoped to avoid for a few more days." He took her hand, pressing a gentle kiss to her knuckles. "Return to your chambers. Rest. We will continue this conversation tomorrow." "Tomorrow," she agreed, though her heart hammered at the thought of what tomorrow might bring. He escorted her to the door of her suite, his hand warm at the small of her back. Before she entered, he caught her arm, turning her to face him. "Whatever Lady Octavia says, whatever rumors you hear, remember one thing." His amber eyes held hers with fierce intensity. "You are not here as a replacement. You are here because you are irreplaceable. There is no one else like you in the world, Lysandra. And I will spend however long I have left proving that to you." He left before she could respond, his long strides carrying him away into the labyrinthine corridors of the palace. Lysandra stood in her doorway for a long moment, her hand pressed to her racing heart. Inside her chambers, Lysandra found the 3 attendants waiting. Wren helped her out of the silver gown and into a soft sleeping shift, while Fern brushed out her hair. Tansy, she noticed, seemed distracted, her dark eyes constantly flickering toward the door. "Is everything all right?" Lysandra asked. Tansy startled slightly, then smiled that smile that never quite reached her eyes. "Of course. I was simply wondering if you enjoyed your dinner with His Majesty." Something in her tone made Lysandra wary. "It was pleasant enough." "I am sure it was." Tansy's voice dripped with false sweetness. "Lady Octavia will be most interested to hear that the king is entertaining village healers in private dinners." Wren shot Tansy a sharp look. "That is enough." "I am merely stating facts." Tansy shrugged, but there was a gleam in her eyes that Lysandra did not like. "Lady Octavia has been very good to us servants. She deserves to know what is happening in her future household." Lysandra understood then. Tansy was not just a curious attendant. She was a spy, placed here to report back to Lady Octavia. She filed this information away, keeping her expression neutral. "I am tired. I would like to rest now." The attendants withdrew, but Lysandra did not sleep. She moved to the window, where her moonflower seedling had grown even more. Its stem was now as thick as her wrist, its leaves broad and luminous in the moonlight. She touched one gently. bracing for the surge of visions. They came, but different this time. Not the past, but something that felt like the future. She saw herself standing in a great hall, dressed in silver, power radiating from her skin. She saw Theron beside her, his hand on her swelling belly. She saw 2 children with amber eyes and silver hair running through moonlit gardens. And she saw Lady Octavia, her face twisted with hatred, a blade gleaming in her hand. The vision shattered. Lysandra gasped, stumbling back from the plant. Her heart raced. Her hands trembled. The prophecy was real. The danger was real. And she had only 3 days to decide if she was brave enough to face both. The next morning brought chaos. Lysandra was awakened by shouting in the corridor outside her chambers. She threw on a robe and opened her door to find servants rushing past, their faces pale with fear. "What is happening?" she demanded, catching Wren by the arm. "Lady Octavia," Wren gasped. "She has called a meeting of the Elder Council. She is demanding that you be removed from the palace." Lysandra's blood ran cold. "On what grounds?" "She claims you have bewitched the king using dark magic. She says you are a threat to the kingdom and must be destroyed." Before Lysandra could respond, Commander Aldrich appeared at the end of the corridor. His expression was grimmer than she had ever seen it. "Miss Whitmore, the king requests your presence in the council chamber immediately." She did not bother changing out of her sleeping shift and robe. There was no time. She followed Aldrich through the palace, her bare feet cold against the marble floors. The council chamber was packed with nobles and elders when they arrived. At one end of a long table sat Theron, his face a mask of barely controlled rage. At the other end stood Lady Octavia Ravenscar. She was beautiful, Lysandra had to admit, tall and elegant, with raven black hair and ice blue eyes. Her crimson gown was immaculate, her posture perfect. She looked every inch the queen she believed herself to be. When her gaze fell upon Lysandra, those blue eyes narrowed with pure hatred. "Ah, the village healer," Lady Octavia purred. "How kind of you to join us, dressed so appropriately for your station." Lysandra felt her cheeks burn, but refused to look away. "I was not aware formal attire was required for false accusations." A murmur ran through the gathered nobles. Lady Octavia's smile tightened. "You see," she said, turning to the council, "she speaks with disrespect to her betters. This is the creature you would have our king bind himself to? This common Omega who cannot even bear children? Enough." Theron's voice cracked through the chamber like thunder. "Lady Octavia, you were not summoned to this palace. You have no authority to call council meetings, and you have no right to speak of matters you do not understand." "I understand perfectly." Lady Octavia stepped forward, her composure cracking slightly. "I understand that I have been promised to you since I was a child. I understand that our union was arranged by the council to strengthen alliances between territories. I understand that some hedge witch from the outer packs has no place in these halls. What you understand," Theron said coldly, "is ambition, nothing more." He rose from his seat, his powerful form dominating the room. "Lysandra Whitmore is here at my personal invitation. She is under my protection. Any threat against her is a threat against the crown." Lady Octavia's face paled, but she held her ground. "And what of the prophecy? What of the rumors that she is supposedly a lunar Omega?" Her laugh was sharp and brittle. "The lunar Omegas are extinct. Everyone knows this. She is nothing but a Barren Omega who has somehow convinced you that she is something more." "Then we shall let the full moon ceremony prove the truth," Theron replied. "In 3 days, Lysandra will stand before the assembled nobles of all 7 territories. If she is what I believe her to be, her power will manifest before witnesses. If she is not, then I will acknowledge my error and she will be returned to her pack with honor." The council members exchanged glances. This seemed a fair compromise. Lady Octavia's eyes gleamed with sudden triumph. And if she fails to prove herself, if this ceremony reveals her to be nothing but a fraud? Theron's expression hardened. Then justice will be served according to our laws. False claims of moonblood are punishable by death. Lysandra felt the floor drop beneath her feet. Death. He was wagering her life on a power she had only just discovered she possessed. A power she did not know how to control. But when she looked at Theron, she saw something else in his amber eyes. Confidence. Faith. Absolute certainty that she was exactly what he believed her to be. He was betting everything on her, and somehow, impossibly, she found herself wanting to prove him right. The council meeting dissolved into chaos after that. Nobles arguing amongst themselves while Lady Octavia swept from the room with barely concealed fury. Theron caught Lysandra's eye across the crowded chamber and nodded slightly toward a side door. She slipped away while no one was watching, finding him waiting in a small antechamber. "I am sorry," he said immediately, his formal mask cracking to reveal the man beneath. "I did not want you to find out about the stakes this way. You wagered my life without consulting me." Her voice shook with emotions she could not quite name. Anger, fear, and beneath it all, a strange certainty that refused to be silenced. "I know." He moved closer, his hands reaching for hers but stopping just short of contact. "I had no choice. The council was ready to side with Octavia. This was the only way to buy us time. 3 days. The words tasted bitter. I have 3 days to learn how to wield a power I did not know existed yesterday. And if I fail, I die. You will not fail." His voice was fierce with conviction. "I have seen what you are, Lysandra. I have felt it. The moonflower would not respond to you if the moonblood was not real. And if I cannot access it, if I cannot make it manifest on command." He was silent for a moment. Then he reached out, finally taking her hand in his. The contact sent the familiar electricity coursing through her, stronger now than before. "Then I will find another way," he said quietly. "I will not let you die for my desperation. I swear it on my blood and my crown." She wanted to believe him. She wanted to trust that this man who had upended her entire existence would somehow make everything right. But trust did not come easily to someone who had spent her whole life being disappointed. "Teach me," she said finally, "whatever I need to know, whatever I need to do to survive. Teach me." His amber eyes blazed with something that looked like hope. "It would be my honor." He raised her hand to his lips, pressing a kiss to her knuckles that lingered just a moment too long. 3 days, he murmured against her skin. "We have 3 days to change everything." Outside the window, the moon was waning. In 3 days, it would be full. In 3 days, everything would change, one way or another. Dawn broke over Moonstone Palace with a sky the color of bruised roses. Lysandra had barely slept, her mind churning with everything she had learned. Lunar Omega, prophecy, curse, a deadline that grew shorter with every passing hour. 2 days remained until the full moon ceremony. 2 days to master a power she had only just discovered existed. She rose from her bed and moved to the window, where her moonflower had grown even larger overnight. Its trunk was now nearly as thick as her forearm, its silver leaves spreading wide enough to catch the first rays of morning light. When she touched it, the familiar warmth pulsed through her fingertips. "Good morning, daughter," the ancient voice whispered through her consciousness. "Are you ready to remember?" Before she could respond, a knock sounded at her door. Wren entered with a breakfast tray, her expression carefully neutral. "His Majesty requests your presence in the garden courtyard after you have eaten," she said. "He wishes to begin your training immediately." Training. The word sent a flutter of anxiety through Lysandra's chest. "And what of the other attendants, Tansy and Fern?" Something flickered in Wren's eyes. "Tansy has been reassigned to the kitchens. Lady Isadora felt her services were better suited elsewhere, so Theron had discovered Tansy's true loyalties. Lysandra felt a small measure of relief, though she knew Lady Octavia would simply find other ways to gather information. And Fern? She remains in your service, along with myself. Wren set the tray on a small table near the window. "We are loyal to the crown, Miss Whitmore, and to you." Lysandra studied the young woman's face, searching for any sign of deception. She found none. "Thank you, Wren. That means more than you know." She ate quickly, her appetite dampened by nerves, then dressed in a simple gown of pale blue that allowed ease of movement. Whatever training Theron had planned, she suspected it would not involve sitting still. The garden courtyard was empty when she arrived, save for Theron himself. He stood before the great moonflower tree, his back to her, his posture radiating tension. He turned at her approach, and Lysandra saw the shadows beneath his amber eyes. He had not slept either. "How do you feel?" he asked, his voice rough. "Anxious, uncertain, determined." She stopped a few feet away from him, acutely aware of the distance between them. "I do not know if that combination will be enough." "It will have to be." He gestured toward the tree. "Come, stand before the moonflower. Place both hands on its bark." She did as instructed, pressing her palms flat against the silver trunk. Immediately, energy surged through her, stronger than before. Her vision blurred, replaced by flashes of silver light and ancient memories that were not her own. "What do you feel?" Theron's voice came from somewhere behind her, distant and muffled. "Power," she gasped. "It is like a river beneath my skin, rushing, overwhelming. I cannot control it." "Do not try to control it." His hands settled on her shoulders, warm and grounding. Lunar magic is not about control. It is about surrender, about allowing yourself to become a vessel for something greater than yourself. "That is terrifying." "Yes." His breath was warm against her ear. "But you have been doing it your entire life without knowing. Every time you healed someone beyond what ordinary skills could achieve. Every time you sensed things others could not perceive. Every time you survived when the world told you that you should not." She thought of the countless patients she had treated, the illnesses she had cured when other healers had given up. She had always attributed it to luck, to stubbornness, to refusing to accept defeat. Perhaps it had been something more. "Focus on the energy," Theron continued. "Do not fight it. Let it flow through you like water through a riverbed. You are not the water. You are the channel through which it moves." Lysandra closed her eyes and tried to do as he instructed. The power rushed and swirled within her, chaotic and wild. Her instinct was to clamp down on it, to force it into submission, but she resisted that urge, instead imagining herself as hollow, as empty, as a vessel waiting to be filled. Slowly, impossibly, the chaos began to settle. The energy did not diminish, but it changed. It became less like a flood and more like a heartbeat, pulsing in rhythm with her own. She could feel it in her blood, in her bones, in every cell of her body. Good. Theron's voice was thick with emotion. Open your eyes. She did, and gasped. Her hands were glowing. A soft silver light emanated from her skin, pulsing gently in time with the energy flowing through her. It was beautiful, ethereal, and absolutely, undeniably real. I am doing this, she whispered, unable to believe her own eyes. I am actually doing this. You are. Theron moved to stand beside her, his amber eyes reflecting the silver light of her power. This is what you are, Lysandra. This is what they tried to bury, what they tried to make you forget. Tears streamed down her cheeks, though she did not remember starting to cry. For 28 years, she had believed herself broken, cursed, less than. Now standing before this ancient tree with power flowing through her veins, she finally understood the truth. She had never been less than. She had always been more. They trained for hours, until Lysandra could summon the silver glow at will and maintain it for several minutes at a time. It was exhausting work, each session leaving her trembling and drained. But with every attempt, her control improved. By midday, she could make the glow bright enough to illuminate the entire courtyard. That is remarkable progress, Theron said, guiding her to a stone bench at the edge of the garden. Most lunar omegas took months to achieve what you have done in hours. Most lunar omegas did not have a death sentence hanging over their heads. Lysandra accepted the cup of water he offered, drinking deeply. Motivation is a powerful teacher. He sat beside her, close enough that their shoulders nearly touched. For a moment, neither spoke. The garden was quiet around them, peaceful in a way that felt fragile. There is something else I must tell you, Theron said finally. His voice had changed, becoming heavier with the weight of unspoken words. Something I should have told you from the beginning. Lysandra's heart stuttered. What is it? He was silent for a long moment, staring at the moonflower tree. When he finally spoke, his voice was rough with emotion. The prophecy speaks of twins, children who will unite the 7 territories and usher in an age of peace. He turned to meet her eyes, and she saw the vulnerability beneath his royal mask. For that to happen, for the curse to truly break, you would have to carry those children. My children. The words hung between them, heavy with implication. You are asking me to be your mate, Lysandra said slowly, not just to prove my power at the ceremony, but to bind myself to you permanently. I am asking nothing. His jaw tightened. I am telling you the truth so that you can make an informed choice. Whatever happens at the ceremony, whatever power you display, it will not break the curse unless the bond is completed, unless we are truly mated. And if I refuse, if I prove my power but choose not to bind myself to you, pain flickered across his features, quickly suppressed. Then you will be free to return to your pack with my protection and my gratitude. The curse will remain, and I will accept my fate. My line will end with me. Lysandra studied his face, searching for any sign of manipulation or coercion. She found none. Only exhaustion, only loneliness, only the desperate hope of a man who had learned to expect nothing. You would let me go, she said softly, even knowing what it would cost you. I have caused enough death by forcing bonds that should not have been forced. His voice cracked slightly. I will not add you to that list, no matter how much I might wish otherwise. She reached out before she could stop herself, her fingers brushing against his jaw. He stiffened at the contact, his amber eyes widening with surprise. "I have not decided anything yet," she said quietly. "But I want you to know that whatever choice I make, it will be mine. Not because of prophecy or duty or fear, because of what I want, what I feel." His hand came up to cover hers, pressing her palm more firmly against his cheek. "And what do you feel, Lysandra?" The question hung between them, charged with possibility. "I do not know yet," she admitted, "but I am beginning to think I would like to find out." That evening, they dined together again in the private chamber. But this time, the formality between them had dissolved. They talked like equals, like friends, like two people discovering each other for the first time. Theron told her about his childhood, about the weight of expectations placed on him from birth. He spoke of his father, a stern and distant man who had taught him that strength meant never showing weakness. He spoke of his mother, who had died when he was young and whose memory he kept alive in small, secret ways. In return, Lysandra told him about her village, about the years of whispered insults and pitying glances. She told him about her mother's death, about the pendant she had left behind, about the words that had sustained her through the darkest times. Light always returns after darkness. She knew, Theron said quietly. Your mother. She knew what you were. And she protected you the only way she could. By hiding me. Lysandra touched the place where the pendant usually rested against her throat. By making me believe I was broken so that no one would look closely enough to see the truth. It must have cost her greatly to watch you suffer while knowing she could not tell you why. Lysandra nodded, tears stinging her eyes. I used to resent her sometimes, for leaving me alone, for not fighting harder to stay. She swallowed hard. Now I understand that everything she did was to keep me safe, even dying. She died rather than risk someone discovering what I was. Theron reached across the table and took her hand. His grip was warm, grounding, solid in a way that made her feel less alone. She would be proud of you, he said, standing here, facing this, refusing to break despite everything. I have not done anything yet. The ceremony is tomorrow night. You have already done more than you know. His thumb traced gentle circles on the back of her hand. You have made me believe that maybe, just maybe, the darkness is not all there is. The moment stretched between them, thick with unspoken emotion. Lysandra felt the pull toward him, the same magnetic attraction that had sparked at their first meeting. But it was different now, deeper, more real. She leaned forward across the table, drawn by something stronger than reason. He met her halfway. The kiss was soft at first, tentative, a question rather than a demand. His lips were warm against hers, gentle in a way that made her heart ache. She felt his restraint, his careful control, his fear of pushing too far. She answered by deepening the kiss, her free hand coming up to cup the back of his neck. He made a sound low in his throat, something between a groan and a growl, and suddenly his arms were around her, lifting her from her chair and pulling her into his lap. Tell me to stop, he murmured against her lips, his voice rough with need. Tell me to stop, and I will. Do not stop. She tangled her fingers in his dark hair, pulling him closer. Not yet. They kissed until they were both breathless, until the candles had burned low and the fire had faded to embers. And when they finally pulled apart, Lysandra saw something in his amber eyes that she had never expected to find. Hope, raw and vulnerable and terrifying in its intensity. Stay with me tonight, he whispered. Not for the prophecy, not for the ceremony, just because I do not want to be alone anymore. She should have said no. She should have retreated to her own chambers and maintained proper boundaries. She should have protected herself from the pain that would inevitably come. Instead, she said yes. They did not make love that night. It was too soon, too fragile, too weighted with expectation. Instead, they lay together in his enormous bed, her head resting on his chest, his arm wrapped protectively around her shoulders. He told her stories about the moonflower tree, about his great-grandmother who had planted it, and the lunar omega she had loved. He told her about the centuries of searching, the desperate attempts to find another like her. He told her about the day he had given up hope and the night 3 months ago when the ancient prophecy had been discovered. I did not believe it at first, he admitted, his fingers tracing idle patterns on her bare shoulder. I had been disappointed too many times, but something made me start searching again. Something I could not explain. And you found me at a fertility ritual in the outer territories. Lysandra smiled against his chest, hardly the most romantic of meetings. I saw you standing there, refusing to cower despite everything they had done to you, and I knew. His voice dropped lower. I knew you were different. I knew you were exactly what I had been looking for. What if I had not planted the seed? What if I had thrown it away? Then I would have found another way to show you the truth. I would have come to your cottage. I would have brought you to the moonflower tree. I would have done whatever it took. She propped herself up on one elbow, looking down at him in the moonlight that filtered through the windows. You really believe in this prophecy? In me? I believe in what I see. His hand came up to cup her face, his thumb brushing across her cheekbone. I believe in a woman who challenged an alpha king the first time she met him, who healed an elder that had treated her cruelly for years, who stood before a hostile council and refused to be diminished. I am afraid, she whispered. I am afraid of failing, of dying, of losing this before it has truly begun. I know. He pulled her down, pressing a kiss to her forehead. I am afraid too, but for the first time in years, I am more afraid of losing you than I am of hope. They fell asleep like that, tangled together beneath silk sheets, the moonlight washing over them like a blessing. When Lysandra woke in the gray hours before dawn, she felt something she had not felt in a very long time. Peace and something else, something new. A warmth in her lower belly that pulsed gently in time with her heartbeat. 2 tiny sparks of life, barely there but unmistakably present. She placed her hand over her abdomen, her heart pounding with sudden certainty. It was impossible. They had not even consummated the bond. But she knew, with absolute conviction, what she was feeling. The twins. The prophecy. It was already beginning. Morning brought chaos. Lysandra was still processing her impossible discovery when Wren burst into the chamber, her face pale with fear. Miss Whitmore, you must wake. Something terrible has happened. Theron was already on his feet, his body tense with predatory alertness. What is it? Lady Octavia, Wren gasped. She has presented evidence to the council. Documents claiming that Miss Whitmore is not a lunar omega at all, but a dark witch who has been using forbidden magic to deceive everyone. The accusation hit Lysandra like a physical blow. That is absurd. I have never practiced dark magic in my life. The evidence is false, obviously. Wren wrung her hands. But she has witnesses, servants who claim to have seen you performing dark rituals. Documents supposedly written in your hand, and she is demanding that the full moon ceremony be cancelled and that you be put to trial immediately. Theron's expression had gone cold. Dangerous. Who are these witnesses? I do not know. all of them, but one name I recognized. Wren's voice dropped to a whisper. Tansy, the attendant who was reassigned. She is claiming that she saw Miss Whitmore sacrifice a rabbit and drink its blood to fuel her dark spells. Lysandra felt sick. She had known Tansy was a spy, but she had not anticipated this level of malicious fabrication. This is obviously a lie, she said, fighting to keep her voice steady. I am a healer. I have dedicated my life to saving lives, not taking them. I know. Theron crossed to her side, his hand finding hers. But Octavia has powerful allies on the council. Her father is a duke with influence across 3 territories. If she pushes for a trial, they may grant it. And if they do, if I am put on trial for dark magic, his jaw tightened. The penalty is death by burning. The words echoed in the silence of the chamber. Death by burning, for a crime she had not committed, because a jealous woman could not accept that her path to power was being blocked. What do we do? Lysandra asked, hating the tremor in her voice. We fight. Theron squeezed her hand. I will not let them take you. I will not let them destroy you with lies and fabrications. He released her and strode toward the door, every inch the Alpha King in that moment. Wren, have Commander Aldrich meet me in the council chamber immediately, and send word to Elder Cordelia. If anyone can verify Lysandra's true nature, it is someone who has known her since childhood. Wren nodded and hurried away. Theron paused at the door, looking back at Lysandra with fierce determination. Stay here. Do not leave this chamber until I return. I will not let them hurt you. Then he was gone, and Lysandra was alone with her fear and her impossible secret. The hours that followed were the longest of Lysandra's life. She paced the chamber, unable to sit still, unable to focus on anything except the accusations hanging over her head. Wren brought updates when she could. The council was in heated debate. Theron was fighting for her with every weapon at his disposal. Elder Cordelia had arrived and was testifying to Lysandra's character, but Lady Octavia had prepared well. Her evidence was detailed, her witnesses convincing, her arguments compelling to those already inclined to believe the worst about a commoner Omega. By late afternoon, no decision had been reached. Lysandra stood at her window, watching the sun begin its descent toward the horizon. Tomorrow night was the full moon ceremony. If the council agreed to a trial instead, she would never get the chance to prove her power. She would be condemned on false evidence, burned for crimes she had not committed, and the twins she carried, barely more than sparks of life, would die with her. She pressed her hand to her belly, feeling those tiny pulses of warmth. They were real. She was certain of it now. 2 lives, fragile and new, growing inside her despite all logic and reason. She had to survive, not just for herself, but for them. A knock at the door made her jump. Fern entered carrying a tray with tea and small cakes. Lady Isadora thought you might be hungry, the quiet attendant said. You have not eaten all day. Lysandra realized she was right. Her stomach growled at the sight of food, her body demanding sustenance even as her mind churned with worry. Thank you, Fern. She sat down at the small table and reached for one of the cakes. Has there been any more news from the council? I do not know, miss. I have been in the kitchens most of the day. Fern poured tea into a delicate cup and pushed it toward Lysandra. Drink. The chamomile will help calm your nerves. Lysandra lifted the cup to her lips, grateful for the warmth. She had taken 2 sips before she noticed the strange aftertaste. Bitter, metallic, wrong. She looked up at Fern, whose expression had changed from quiet servility to something cold and triumphant. "What have you done?" Lysandra whispered, the cup slipping from her suddenly numb fingers. "What Lady Octavia asked me to do." Fern's voice was different now, hard and cruel. Tansy was too obvious. Everyone knew she was a spy. But me? Quiet little Fern who never says a word? No one suspected. Pain lanced through Lysandra's abdomen, sharp and vicious. She doubled over, gasping. "Wolfsbane," Fern continued, watching with detached interest. "Not enough to kill you outright. Just enough to destroy what is growing inside you. Lady Octavia did her research. She knows that lunar omegas can conceive from a single kiss when the bond is forming. She knew there was a chance you might already be carrying the king's heirs. No. No, no, no." Lysandra tried to stand, but her legs would not support her. She collapsed to the floor, agony ripping through her body. "The children die first," Fern said, crouching down to look Lysandra in the eye. "Then you grow weak enough that you cannot possibly display any power at the ceremony. And without proof of your lunar blood, the council will have no choice but to grant the trial. Lady Octavia wins. The king remains alone, and the prophecy dies with you." Through the haze of pain, Lysandra felt something else, a stirring deep inside her. A warmth that pushed back against the poison coursing through her veins. Her children were fighting, and so would she. "Get out," she gasped, her voice barely audible. Fern laughed. "You cannot even stand. How do you expect to make me leave?" Lysandra did not answer with words. The power exploded from her without warning. A blast of silver light that threw Fern across the room and into the far wall. The attendant crumpled, unconscious, as the door burst open and Wren rushed in. "Miss Whitmore!" "I heard a noise and—" She saw Lysandra on the floor, saw Fern's unconscious form, and her face went white. "What happened?" "Poison," Lysandra managed. "Wolfsbane, get Theron. Get him now." Wren ran, and Lysandra curled around her belly, silver light pulsing weakly from her skin as she fought with everything she had to protect the lives growing inside her. When Theron burst through the door minutes later, he found Lysandra surrounded by a cocoon of silver light. Her body convulsed with pain, but the glow emanating from her skin pulsed steadily, stubbornly, refusing to die. "Lysandra!" He dropped to his knees beside her, his hands hovering over her body, afraid to touch her and disrupt whatever magic was keeping her alive. "Tell me what to do. Tell me how to help." "Cannot stop," she gasped. "If I stop, they die." "They?" His voice cracked. "Lysandra, what are you talking about?" She managed to meet his eyes, and he saw tears streaming down her face. "The twins, Theron. I felt them this morning. They are real. They are already here." The words hit him like a physical blow. Twins, children, his children. And someone had tried to murder them. A sound escaped his throat, something between a roar and a sob. He gathered her carefully in his arms, mindful of the silver light still pulsing around her, and lifted her onto the bed. "Do not stop fighting," he commanded, his alpha voice ringing with power. "Whatever it takes, do not stop. I cannot do it alone." Her voice was fading. "The poison is too strong. I need more power than I have." Theron did not hesitate. He climbed onto the bed beside her, pulled her into his arms, and pressed his forehead to hers. "Then take mine," he said. "Take whatever you need. I give it freely." He felt the moment their energies connected. It was like nothing he had ever experienced, a merging of souls that transcended the physical. His strength flowed into her, and her silver light surrounded them both, creating a barrier against the darkness. Together, They fought. The battle lasted for hours. Commander Aldrich arrived with healers, but there was nothing conventional medicine could do. This was a war fought with magic and will and the desperate determination of two people fighting for lives that had barely begun. Slowly, impossibly, the tide began to turn. The silver light grew brighter as the poison was pushed back. Lysandra's convulsions eased, her breathing steadied, her grip on Theron's hand grew stronger rather than weaker. And deep in her belly, two tiny heartbeats continued to pulse. Weak, fragile, but alive. They survived, Lysandra whispered as the silver light finally faded to a gentle glow. Our children survived. Theron gathered her against his chest, his body shaking with the aftermath of fear and relief and something too big to name. I almost lost you, he said, his voice breaking. I almost lost all of you. But you did not. She pressed her hand over his heart, feeling it pound beneath her palm. We are still here. We are still fighting. He pulled back to look at her face, and she saw tears tracking down his cheeks. This powerful man, this alpha king who had ruled alone for so long, was crying. I love you, he said, the words rough with emotion. I did not want to say it until you were ready. I did not want to pressure you or make you feel obligated, but I almost lost you tonight without you ever knowing, and I cannot bear that. I love you, Lysandra. I have loved you since you looked at me at those hot springs and demanded to be called by your name. She reached up to cup his face, wiping his tears away with her thumbs. I love you too, she whispered. I did not want to admit it. I was too afraid of being hurt again. But you have shown me what it means to be cherished, to be protected, to be seen for who I truly am. He kissed her then, soft and reverent, a promise of everything they would build together. When they finally pulled apart, dawn was breaking through the windows. The full moon ceremony was tonight, and they would face it together. The morning brought a harsh reckoning. Lysandra could barely move. The poison had been purged, but it had taken nearly everything she had. Her body felt hollow, emptied of strength. The silver light that had pulsed so strongly through the night was now just a faint glimmer beneath her skin. Theron had not left her side. He sat beside the bed, holding her hand, his face a mask of barely controlled fury. Commander Aldrich entered with grim news. Fern has confessed. She was paid by Lady Octavia to poison Miss Whitmore. We have her signed statement and testimony. Then arrest Octavia, Theron growled. Execute her for attempted murder of the royal consort and heirs. We cannot. Aldrich's expression was apologetic but firm. The council is demanding proof that the children exist. Without that proof, we cannot charge her with attempted murder of heirs. And without proof of Miss Whitmore's lunar blood, the council still has grounds to proceed with the trial Lady Octavia demanded. This is insane. Lysandra nearly died. Our children nearly died. I know, Your Majesty, but the law is clear. Unless Miss Whitmore can demonstrate her power at the ceremony tonight, the council has the authority to override your objections. Lysandra listened to this exchange with growing despair. She had survived the poison, yes, but at what cost? She could barely lift her head, let alone summon the kind of power she would need to convince a hostile council of her true nature. I need time, she said weakly. A few days to recover. Surely the ceremony can be postponed. Aldrich shook his head. Tonight is the full moon of His Majesty's 33rd year. According to the prophecy, the curse must be broken before this moon sets, or it becomes permanent. There is no postponement possible. The weight of those words settled over Lysandra like a shroud. She was too weak to stand, too drained to summon her power, and the ceremony that would determine all their fates was mere hours away. "Leave us," Theron said quietly. Aldrich bowed and withdrew. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. The morning light filtered through the windows, pale and cold. "I will cancel it," Theron said finally. "I will dissolve the council. I will fight anyone who tries to take you from me, and start a civil war in the process." Lysandra's voice was barely audible. "Your people would die. Your kingdom would be torn apart. All because of me. You are worth it. You and our children are worth any cost." "No." She forced herself to meet his eyes. "I will not let you destroy everything you have built. I will not let our children grow up in a kingdom ravaged by war, because their father put love before duty." His expression crumpled. For a moment, he looked less like a king and more like a man watching everything he cared about slip away. "Then what do we do?" he asked, his voice breaking. "How do we survive this?" Lysandra did not have an answer, but as she lay there in his arms, weak and afraid and seemingly defeated, she felt something stir deep inside her. Not her own strength. That was nearly gone. But the strength of her children. Those two tiny sparks of life, fighting to survive despite everything. They had inherited her will, her stubbornness, her refusal to accept defeat. And perhaps, just perhaps, they had inherited something else as well. "Help me to the window," she whispered. Theron looked at her with confusion, but did as she asked, supporting her weight as she shuffled toward the moonflower plant that had grown so large it now brushed the ceiling. Lysandra pressed both hands against its silver trunk. The connection that surged through her was different this time. Not just the ancient voice of her ancestors, but something newer, fresher. Two tiny presences, bright and fierce, and absolutely determined. "Hello, little ones," she thought. "I need your help. Can you give me strength?" The response was not words, but feeling. Love, determination, a stubbornness that rivaled her own, and power. Silver light began to glow beneath her skin, faint at first, but growing stronger. Not from her depleted reserves, but from the new lives growing inside her. "Lysandra," Theron's voice was awed. "What is happening?" She turned to face him, and she knew her eyes were glowing silver. "Our children are lending me their strength," she said, her voice steadier now. "They want to live, Theron. They want to be born into a world where their parents are together and their kingdom is at peace. Is it safe? Will it hurt them? I do not know." She pressed her hand over her belly, feeling those twin pulses of warmth. "But they chose this. They are choosing to fight alongside me, and I will not dishonor their courage by giving up." Theron stared at her for a long moment. Then he laughed, a sound that mixed wonder with relief. "They are definitely your children," he said. "Stubborn and brave and absolutely unwilling to accept defeat. They are your children too." She managed a small smile. "Which means they are also foolishly protective and prone to grand gestures." He pulled her into his arms, careful of her still fragile body. "Then we will do this together. All four of us." The sun climbed higher in the sky. Tonight would be the full moon ceremony. Tonight, everything would change. The afternoon sun cast long shadows across the chamber as Lysandra prepared for the battle ahead. She stood before the mirror, studying the woman who stared back at her. Pale skin still carrying traces of illness. Gray eyes ringed with exhaustion, a body that trembled with the effort of simply remaining upright. But beneath that fragile exterior, Silver light pulsed in steady rhythm with her heartbeat. With 3 heartbeats, she corrected herself. Hers and the 2 tiny lives that had chosen to fight alongside her. Elder Cordelia had arrived an hour ago, her weathered face lined with concern, but also with something else. Pride, perhaps, or hope. "The council has agreed to proceed with the ceremony," the elder reported. Lady Octavia fought against it, but Commander Aldrich's testimony about the poisoning swayed enough votes. They want to see the truth for themselves. "And if I fail?" Lysandra asked, her voice steady despite the fear coiling in her chest. "Then Lady Octavia gets her trial, and the consequences that follow. Death by burning." The words hung unspoken between them. Elder Cordelia moved to stand beside her, placing a gnarled hand on Lysandra's shoulder. "Do you remember what I told you before you left the village? What I said as the carriage pulled away?" Lysandra nodded slowly. "You told me to remember who I am." "And who are you, child?" The question echoed in the quiet chamber. Lysandra closed her eyes, reaching deep within herself for the answer. She thought of her mother, gentle and loving, who had sacrificed everything to keep her daughter safe. She thought of the years of rejection, the whispered insults, the pitying glances that had cut deeper than any blade. She thought of the moment she had looked into Theron's amber eyes and felt something shift inside her. She thought of the 2 sparks of life now sharing her body, lending her their strength, choosing to fight before they had even drawn their first breath. "I am Lysandra Whitmore," she said softly, "daughter of Rowena, healer of the Outer Pack." Her voice grew stronger. "I am a lunar Omega, last of an ancient bloodline. I carry the blood of my ancestors in my veins, and their strength in my heart." She opened her eyes, and in the mirror, she saw silver light beginning to glow beneath her skin. "I am the mother of prophecy, the mate of the Alpha King, and I will not be broken by jealousy, by lies, or by poison." Elder Cordelia smiled, and there were tears in her ancient eyes. "Now you understand. The power of a lunar Omega does not come from her body alone. It comes from her will, from her choice to stand when others would fall, from her refusal to be anything less than what she truly is." "I am still weak," Lysandra admitted. "The poison took so much from me." "Then be weak." The elder squeezed her shoulder. "Be weak and afraid and uncertain. Feel all of those things, and then stand anyway. That is not weakness, child. That is courage." A knock at the door interrupted them. Wren entered, her arms full of silver blue silk. "It is time to dress, miss. The ceremony begins at moonrise." Lysandra took a deep breath, feeling the twin pulses of warmth in her belly. "Then let us begin." They dressed her in a gown even more magnificent than the one she had worn to her first dinner with Theron. Silver blue silk flowed like moonlit water, the bodice encrusted with crystals that caught every flicker of light. A cape of sheer fabric attached at her shoulders, embroidered with silver thread and patterns that seemed to shift and move. Wren arranged her pale hair in an elaborate style, weaving silver ribbons and tiny crystal stars throughout. A touch of cosmetics brought color to her cheeks and depth to her eyes, but it was the final addition that made Lysandra's breath catch. Elder Cordelia produced a small velvet box and opened it to reveal her mother's pendant, the silver crescent moon that Lysandra had left behind when she departed for the palace. "How did you get this?" Lysandra whispered. "Theron sent for it the day you arrived," the elder replied. "He wanted you to have it for the ceremony." Lysandra lifted the pendant with trembling fingers. The metal was warm, as though it had been waiting for her touch. When she clasped it around her neck, She felt a surge of connection, of belonging, of love that transcended death itself. "I am with you," her mother's voice seemed to whisper. "I have always been with you." "You look beautiful," Ren said softly. Lysandra studied her reflection. She did not look like a village healer anymore. She did not even look like the frightened Omega who had arrived at the palace 3 days ago. She looked like a queen. Another knock at the door. This time, it was Commander Aldrich. "Miss Whitmore, His Majesty awaits you in the antechamber." Lysandra smoothed her gown one final time, then turned to Elder Cordelia. "Will you walk with me?" The old woman's eyes shimmered. "It would be my honor." Theron was pacing when she entered, his formal black attire a stark contrast to the silver of her gown. The crown of platinum and obsidian rested on his dark hair, marking him unmistakably as the Alpha King of the 7 territories. He stopped mid-stride when he saw her. For a long moment he simply stared, his amber eyes drinking in every detail of her appearance. Then he crossed the distance between them in 3 quick strides and took her hands in his. "You are magnificent," he breathed. "I have never seen anything so beautiful in my entire existence." "Flattery will not make me any less nervous," Lysandra replied, though she could not suppress a small smile. "It is not flattery, it is truth." He lifted her hands to his lips, pressing a kiss to each palm. "How do you feel?" "Terrified, exhausted, determined." She met his eyes. "Our children are giving me strength. I can feel them, Theron. They want this as much as we do." Something fierce and protective flared in his expression. "I will not let anyone hurt them, or you, no matter what happens tonight." "I know." She squeezed his hands. "But I need you to promise me something. Anything. If I fail, if the power does not manifest the way it should, do not start a war over me. Do not destroy your kingdom for revenge." Her voice trembled but did not break. "Our children deserve a world to be born into. A world where their father's people are not dying in their name." Pain flickered across his features. "You are asking me to let you die." "I am asking you to be the king your people need. The king our children will need." She touched his face, tracing the strong line of his jaw. "I do not plan to fail, Theron. I plan to stand before that council and prove exactly what I am. But if something goes wrong, I need to know that you will survive, that you will protect what matters most." He was silent for a long moment, conflict warring in his amber eyes. Finally, he nodded, the movement tight with suppressed emotion. "I promise," he said roughly, "but only because I believe you will not fail. You are too stubborn for that." Despite everything, Lysandra laughed. "I learned from the best." He pulled her into his arms, holding her close as though he might never have the chance again. She breathed in his scent, earth and pine and something wild, committing it to memory. "I love you," he murmured against her hair. "Whatever happens tonight, whatever tomorrow brings, I need you to know that. You have changed everything, Lysandra. You have made me believe in hope again. I love you too." She pressed her lips to his throat, feeling his pulse pound beneath her kiss. "Now let us go show them what a lunar Omega can do." The grand hall of Moonstone Palace had been transformed. Hundreds of candles flickered from every surface, their light dancing across walls draped in silver and blue. The high windows had been uncovered, waiting for the moon to rise and fill the space with its radiance. Nobles from all 7 territories packed the hall, their finest attire glittering like a sea of jewels. At the far end, 3 massive thrones dominated a raised dais. The largest was Theron's seat of power. Beside it, A slightly smaller throne had been prepared, draped in silver silk. The third, usually reserved for visiting dignitaries, sat empty and waiting. And standing near the front of the assembled crowd, her crimson gown a splash of blood against the silver decorations, was Lady Octavia Ravenscar. Her ice-blue eyes fixed on Lysandra with undisguised hatred as she entered the hall on Theron's arm. The noble woman's face was pale, her posture rigid with barely contained fury. The poisoning attempt had failed. Her spy had been exposed, and now she was forced to watch as the Omega she had tried to destroy walked toward the throne that should have been hers. Lysandra met that hateful gaze without flinching. She had survived worse than aristocratic jealousy. She had survived years of rejection, a murder attempt, and the near loss of her unborn children. A single angry woman was not going to break her now. The crowd parted as they walked, whispers following in their wake. Lysandra heard fragments of conversation. The Barren Omega, the prophecy, lunar blood, impossible, fraud. Let them whisper, she thought. Let them doubt. Tonight, they will see the truth. They reached the dais, and Theron guided her to stand at its center, where the moonlight would fall when the moon rose above the windows. He squeezed her hand once, a silent message of support, then moved to take his seat on the throne. Elder Cordelia had been given a place of honor near the dais. Commander Aldrich stood at attention beside the king. Lady Isadora watched from the shadows, her expression unreadable, and behind Lysandra, through the great glass windows, the full moon began to rise. A herald's voice rang out across the hall, calling for silence. The murmuring crowd fell quiet, hundreds of faces turning toward the dais with varying degrees of curiosity, skepticism, and hostility. "Lords and ladies of the 7 territories," the herald announced, "we gather tonight for the full moon ceremony, as tradition demands. But this evening's ceremony holds special significance." He gestured toward Lysandra. "Before you stands Lysandra Whitmore, an Omega from the outer territories who claims the blood of the ancient lunar line. She has been challenged to prove her heritage before this assembly. If she succeeds, she will be recognized as the mate of Alpha King Theron Nighthollow. If she fails, she will face trial for false claims of moonblood." Lady Octavia stepped forward, her voice cutting through the hall like a blade. "This is absurd, and everyone here knows it. The lunar Omegas are extinct. They have been for centuries. This common healer is nothing but a fraud who has somehow bewitched our king with dark magic." Angry murmurs rippled through the crowd. Lysandra felt the weight of their suspicion pressing down on her, but she did not waver. "If I am a fraud," she said, her voice carrying clearly despite its softness, "then tonight will prove it. I ask only for the chance to demonstrate the truth." "The chance to perform more tricks, you mean?" Lady Octavia's lips curled with contempt. "We all know you somehow made a plant grow. A simple parlor trick that proves nothing." "Then what would prove it?" Lysandra asked calmly. "What demonstration would satisfy you, Lady Octavia?" The noblewoman's eyes gleamed with malicious triumph. True lunar Omegas were said to glow with the light of the moon itself. They could heal wounds that no ordinary healer could touch. They could see truths hidden from common eyes. She spread her hands. "If you are truly what you claim, then show us. Make your skin glow. Heal an unhealable wound. Reveal a hidden truth." The crowd murmured in agreement. Several council members nodded, clearly finding these demands reasonable. Lysandra felt her heart sink. In her current weakened state, she was not certain she could produce a glow bright enough to be seen across the hall. She had no wounded person to heal. And as for revealing hidden truths, she had no idea how to summon that particular ability. But she could not show doubt. Not now. "I accept your challenge," she said. "When the moon reaches its zenith, I will demonstrate each of these abilities." Lady Octavia smiled, confident that she had set an impossible task. "We look forward to it." The crowd settled back to wait, their eyes fixed on the windows where the moon continued its slow ascent. Lysandra stood alone in the center of the dais, feeling the weight of hundreds of stares. Inside her belly, two tiny presences pulsed with warmth and determination. "We are here," they seemed to say. "We are with you." Lysandra closed her eyes and reached for her power. The moon climbed higher, its silver light streaming through the great windows and falling across the dais like a spotlight. Lysandra felt it touch her skin, and something deep inside her stirred in response. The power was there, waiting, but it was buried beneath layers of exhaustion and the lingering effects of the poison. She reached for it, straining with everything she had. Nothing happened. The crowd began to murmur. Lady Octavia's smile widened. Lysandra felt panic rising in her chest. She could not fail. Not after everything. Not with her children's lives hanging in the balance. "Please," she thought desperately. "Please, I need more strength." And from deep within her belly, two tiny voices answered, "Take ours." Power surged through her, raw and wild and absolutely overwhelming. It was not the controlled flow she had practiced in the garden with Theron. This was a flood, a torrent, an ocean of silver light that poured through her veins and exploded from her skin. The crowd gasped as Lysandra began to glow. It started as a faint shimmer, barely visible in the candlelight. But as the moon rose higher, the glow intensified. Silver light radiated from every inch of her skin, brighter and brighter until she was difficult to look at directly. Her hair lifted in an ethereal breeze that touched nothing else. Her eyes, when she opened them, blazed with pure silver fire. The crystals on her gown caught the light and multiplied it, surrounding her in a halo of dancing stars. "Impossible," someone whispered. "The prophecy," another voice breathed. "It is true." Lady Octavia had gone pale, her confident smile replaced by naked fear. "Tricks," she said, but her voice lacked conviction. "This is just more dark magic." "Dark magic cannot produce light like this," Elder Cordelia said, stepping forward. Her ancient voice rang with authority. "I have studied the texts. I have researched the old ways. Only true lunar blood can glow with the moon's radiance." The council members exchanged glances, clearly swayed by what they were seeing, but Lady Octavia was not finished. "Light proves nothing," she insisted desperately. "What of healing? What of revealing truths? She has shown us one trick. Let her show us the others." Lysandra turned her glowing gaze upon the noblewoman. In that moment, she felt something shift inside her. A new awareness opening, like a door that had always been there but never before unlocked. She could see things now. Hidden things. Truths buried beneath layers of deception and pretense. And Lady Octavia Ravenscar had so many layers to see through. "You want truth?" Lysandra's voice resonated with power, echoing through the hall in a way that made several nobles take involuntary steps backward. "Then truth you shall have." She raised her hand toward Lady Octavia, and silver light flowed from her fingertips like ribbons of moonlight. "I see you, Octavia Ravenscar. I see the darkness you hide beneath your silk and jewels." The noblewoman tried to retreat, but she seemed frozen in place, held by some invisible force. "You did not merely send a spy to poison me," Lysandra continued, her voice carrying to every corner of the hall. You planned it for months. You paid assassins to eliminate any Omega who might catch the king's attention. 3 women died before I arrived. 3 innocent lives sacrificed for your ambition. Horrified gasps echoed through the crowd. Several nobles turned to stare at Lady Octavia with new understanding. That is a lie, Octavia shrieked. She is fabricating accusations to destroy me. I cannot fabricate what I can see. Lysandra's eyes blazed brighter. You keep records of your transactions in a hidden compartment in your bedchamber, behind the portrait of your grandmother, the payments to the assassins, the instructions to your spies, the letters plotting my death, and the death of my unborn children. Commander Aldrich stepped forward, his expression grim. I will send men to search Lady Octavia's chambers immediately. You cannot. Octavia's composure had completely shattered. I am the daughter of a duke. I have rights. You have the right to answer for your crimes. Theron's voice was ice cold. He had risen from his throne, his amber eyes blazing with fury. If what Lysandra sees is true, if those records exist, you will face the full weight of royal justice. She is manipulating you, Octavia screamed. She has bewitched you with her dark arts. Can you not see what she is doing? I see clearly for the first time in years. Theron descended from the dais, his movements predatory. I see a jealous woman so consumed by ambition that she would murder innocent people to achieve her goals. I see a traitor to the crown who has spent months plotting against her king. He stopped directly in front of Octavia, towering over her trembling form. And I see justice finally being served. Take her to the cells, he commanded. She will await trial for treason, attempted murder, and conspiracy against the royal house. Guards moved forward to seize Lady Octavia. She struggled against them, screaming accusations and denials, but her words were lost in the chaos. As they dragged her from the hall, she cast one last look of pure hatred toward Lysandra. This is not over, she spat. You have not won. You will never be accepted. You will never be one of us. Lysandra met her gaze without flinching. I do not need to be one of you. I am something else entirely. The doors closed behind Lady Octavia, cutting off her final screams. Silence fell over the hall. Lysandra stood in the aftermath of the confrontation, the silver light still glowing from her skin. The crowd stared at her with a mixture of awe and fear, uncertain how to respond to what they had witnessed. Then a voice called out from the back of the hall. Please, my daughter. She is dying. The crowd parted to reveal a man carrying a small girl in his arms. The child was pale as death, her breathing shallow, her body limp. The healers say there is nothing more they can do, the man sobbed. She has been sick for months. They say her lungs are failing. Please, if you truly have moon magic, please save her. Lysandra felt her heart clench. She was already so drained. The revelation of light, the vision of truth, the power borrowed from her unborn children. She did not know if she had anything left to give, but she could not turn away from a dying child. Bring her to me, she said softly. The man stumbled forward, laying his daughter at Lysandra's feet. Up close, she could see how pale the child was, how blue her lips had become. She was perhaps 8 years old, with golden hair matted with sweat and eyes that fluttered weakly. Lysandra knelt beside her, pressing her hands against the child's chest. She could feel it immediately, the wrongness inside the little body. Lungs scarred and failing, struggling to draw breath. A disease that had taken root months ago and slowly spread until there was almost nothing healthy left. The healers were right. By ordinary means, this child would be dead within days. But Lysandra was not ordinary. She closed her eyes and reached deep within herself, past her own depleted reserves, past the strength her children had lent her. She reached for something older, something that lived in her blood and her bones, the power of her mother, her grandmother, her ancestors stretching back to the beginning of time. Daughter of the moon, the ancient voice whispered. Heal. Silver light poured from Lysandra's hands into the child's body. She felt it seeking out the disease, surrounding it, dissolving it, cell by cell. She felt the scarred tissue regenerating, the damaged lungs rebuilding themselves, the failing heart growing strong again. The child gasped, her eyes flying open. Color flooded back into her cheeks. Her breathing steadied, then deepened. The blue tinge left her lips, replaced by healthy pink. "Papa?" she whispered. Her father collapsed to his knees, tears streaming down his face. She spoke. She has not spoken in weeks. She could not breathe enough to speak. Lysandra withdrew her hands, swaying with exhaustion. The silver glow around her had dimmed to almost nothing, but she did not care. The child was alive. The child would survive. The crowd erupted, not in anger or fear, but in wonder, in joy, in the ecstatic celebration of a miracle witnessed. "Lunar Omega," someone shouted. "The prophecy is true. Long live the Moon Queen. Blessed be the moon. Blessed be her chosen daughter." The chant spread through the hall, growing louder and louder until the walls themselves seemed to shake with the force of it. Lysandra tried to stand but found she could not. Her legs gave way beneath her, and she began to fall. Strong arms caught her. Theron lifted her against his chest, cradling her like something infinitely precious. His amber eyes blazed with tears and triumph. "You did it," he breathed. "You proved them all wrong. You proved everything." "Our children helped," she whispered. "I could not have done it without them." He pressed his forehead to hers, laughing and crying at the same time. "They are definitely their mother's children. Stubborn, brave, and absolutely magnificent." The council had no choice but to acknowledge what they had witnessed. The glow. The revelation of Lady Octavia's crimes, later confirmed when the hidden documents were discovered exactly where Lysandra had said they would be. The healing of a child that all other healers had given up on. There could be no more doubt, no more denial. Lysandra Whitmore was a lunar Omega. The prophecy was real, and she was destined to be the Alpha King's mate. The nobles knelt as Theron carried her to the dais, their heads bowed in acknowledgement of her power and her place. Even those who had whispered against her, who had doubted and judged and condemned, now offered their respect. He set her gently in the silver-draped throne beside his own. She was still weak, still trembling with exhaustion, but she sat with her back straight and her chin high. She had earned this moment. She would not diminish it by appearing anything less than the queen she was about to become. Theron stood before the assembled nobles, his voice ringing with authority. "Lords and ladies of the 7 territories, you have witnessed tonight the proof of ancient prophecy. Lysandra Whitmore carries the blood of the lunar Omegas in her veins. She has demonstrated power that none of us believed still existed in this world." He turned to face her, and his expression softened with love. "But more than that, she has shown courage that humbles me, strength that inspires me, grace under pressure that puts my own to shame." He knelt before her throne, this powerful Alpha King bowing to a woman who had been called cursed and barren just 3 days ago. "Lysandra Whitmore, you have proven yourself in every way possible. You have faced accusations and poison and hatred and you have emerged triumphant. You have given me hope when I thought none remained. You have given me a future when I believed my line would end with me." He took her hand in his amber eyes burning with fierce devotion. "I ask you now, before all these witnesses, to accept the bond that destiny has prepared for us. Not because prophecy demands it, not because duty requires it, but because I love you, because I cannot imagine facing another day without you by my side." Lysandra looked down at him. This man who had turned her world upside down in the span of 3 days. This man who had believed in her when no one else would.